Hello, everyone. My name is John. I'm a software engineer with 10 years of experience. I've worked for household names, including Amazon and Capital One. I have a PhD in economics where I studied the return on investment to post-secondary alternative credentials. So these would be things like coding boot camps, certifications, and so on. And I'm the lead maintainer of latterly.io, an open source educational platform that helps you land your first or next programming role. You can sign up for free. You can unlock additional features by paying what you can, including an advanced checklist that will accelerate your job search, and even more cool stuff if you want to join the big leagues at $30 a month. This is the trial by fire. The trial by fire is a hyper-concentrated overview of building a basic website. You're not expected to retain all these concepts. It's meant to be an overview and a preview, and setting the stage in the big picture so that when we dive into each particular topic, you're never wondering, like, why am I doing this? You always have the end goal in mind, and the end goal will simply be to build a portfolio of interesting and useful websites. So we're going to build a very basic one today. By building this very basic one, you will get a feel for the minimal technologies needed, and then later you'll be able to combat shiny object syndrome, which is this overwhelming number of tools that exist in the web development world. Every time you see a new tool, you'll be able to say, what value does this bring compared to doing it the manual, basic, minimal way? And if you can't answer that question, you probably don't need the tool. Thanks for joining, Clay. All right, before we dive in, let's go through kind of some overview notes. This will take 30 minutes to an hour for me to present to you. And you may watch it many times over. It might take you 10 hours. It might take you a week. It might take you 10 hours scattered throughout the week. That's totally fine and normal. So again, this is a crash course concentrated to an insane degree. We're going to touch on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, GitOps, and DevOps, which means we're actually going to deploy the website using GitHub pages, and it will be publicly viewable. You'll be able to send this to your loved one or mother or friend, and they will be able to, on their own browser, on their own phone, or on their own computer, they will be able to see what you've built, the actual website, not just the code or anything like that. So this is something that's missing in a lot of these basic courses, certainly missing in a lot of the 30-minute to 1 hour intros that you'll see elsewhere. Again, the purpose here is not to teach you in depth about these topics. We're teaching you the minimum to get a site working. And it's setting the stage for diving in further in the future. Another point of this is to remove fear and improve motivation. So it's true that in the future, you'll need to unpack everything we do further, but it's also true that it is possible to demonstrate the entirety of web development and the software development lifecycle in under an hour. And that's kind of the purpose here is we may fall into a trap as we're learning, and we may become concerned that what we're doing is too complicated. And maybe what we are doing is too complicated. So we should always be able to backtrack, take a step back, and remember this basic high-level overview. And that can help us navigate out of that problem or avoid the problem to begin with of falling into unnecessary complexity and fear. Another point is to give you a visual picture. So some people are visual learners. I think I fall in this category to some degree. By being able to picture what a deployed website looks like visually, it can just help us navigate the particular technical problems in some cases. So again, I shouldn't have to ask the question like, why am I doing this? Have you ever been in high school and you were learning maybe geometry and you're wondering like, what am I going to do with this geometry topic? If you follow the latterly.io curriculum, and maybe you follow it with some help, that's great. You can join the Discord community here for free. You can book a session with an expert, and there are also options for small group learning. Or you can go about it yourself. You should never find yourself in the case of the geometry class. You should never find yourself going, what am I doing? This seems irrelevant. Every element of the Latterly curriculum is explainably necessary. And being able to connect each particular task to a bigger picture is one of the goals of this trial by fire. Another goal is to provide proof of work on your first day. We're going to push up to GitHub. We're going to show you what GitHub is, why it matters. It is your portfolio. And you will have proof, you'll have evidence that you are a programmer from today if you make it to that stage today. Anytime a recruiter asks for your years of experience, you will start with today, if not earlier, if you've not already started earlier. You should not let anyone demean you. You should not let anyone tell you that you don't have experience. You do. It may not be paid experience. That's irrelevant. This is open source contribution. Open source contributions are valuable. They're valuable to you. They're valuable to your companies. They're valuable to the world. Open source is a big deal. And you are contributing to open source. And by the time you complete this trial by fire, you will be programming. You will be creating programs. What do programmers do? They create programs. You will be developing software. You will be a web developer. Those things will be true. They will not be in progress. So hopefully this is a boost to your confidence. As we've already covered, to show you a minimal example of a website, which is going to help you combat a deluge of unnecessary tools that you will probably run into in the future. You won't need them, and you won't be wondering, am I missing on something? Am I missing out on something? You will always have a concrete, fundamental base path. And maybe you do find a tool, React would be a great example, that simplifies that path. But if it doesn't simplify your path, you can always throw it out and come back to these basics. Great. As I said, please pause and watch multiple times if needed. I may do this inside of an hour and it may take you a week. That is fine and normal. If you require additional help because you would like to learn more quickly, maybe a week is like, oh, I don't want to take a week to learn these basics, and then it will be several weeks per topic after that. If you want to consider an accelerated path, reach out. I showed you where the Discord is. I'll show you one more time. There it is, under the community tab at latterly.io. You can also book an expert. And in that expert session, you might get personalized teaching, but you also might get guidance about how to select a coding bootcamp. I'll give you a quick rule. You can go to coursereport.com, browse schools, sort by the most reviewed, find a school that has more than 400 reviews and an average rating of 4.25 or better. This is the criteria for a prestigious bootcamp, and this will rule out many of the low quality boot camps. I've seen people just make a 1-hour YouTube video and call that a boot camp. That's not a boot camp. That's not going to get you a job. So following that rule would be an example of the expert guidance that you could get to find a boot camp, but maybe you don't want a boot camp. Maybe you're looking for a university that works for you or an online course that works for you. So using that expert session as a consult is one option. In addition to, you could just outright use the session for one-on-one teaching as well. Different things you can do with those expert sessions. Okay, final couple sections here. This is the second version of the Trial by Fire, January 2024, now featuring ChatGPT. Here in 2024, ChatGPT is a table stakes, high-value developer tool that was not addressed in the previous Trial by Fire. There will be a link to the previous Trial by Fire in the description. It would likely be a benefit of you to watch both, but it's not necessary, but it could help reinforce the topics. We are now anchoring on latterly.io. Version 1 did anchor on the Latterly curriculum, but that curriculum, when it was administered through Teachable back at that time. Now we have our own site, and you can contribute directly to this site when you advance. And if you'd like to do some contributions here, it's fully open source. We're not using the Teachable platform anymore. And yeah, you'll get this step-by-step checklist. You get this if you sign up for free. It's walking you through joining the Discord search techniques that are incredibly important. So drilling into using ChatGPT, there's going to be more of that here. We'll just touch on the surface in the current Trial by Fire video. That dedicated YouTube video dives further. Here's a link to the old Trial by Fire, HTML, CSS, and this is a step-by-step checklist that you get that will help you learn to code and land your first or next programming role. That's included in the free tier. And so that is what we are anchoring on in this video. And we'll be using the GitHub web editor, which is OS agnostic. In the first Trial by Fire, we started with text, or Notepad, which is a application built into Windows. And That's sort of a Windows specific approach, although we quickly moved to VS Code, which also exists on other platforms. It's really not necessary to use Notepad. And it threw some people off, some people that didn't have an application called Notepad. So we will start with the GitHub web editor, which is a new cool thing that GitHub has built in, and anyone who has a Chrome browser will be able to access that. Which brings us to, what do we need? You need a stable internet connection. You don't need high-speed internet. It can be quite slow, but it needs to be stable. Consider visiting a Starbucks or your local library if you don't have a internet connection at your home. You need a laptop or desktop. Coding on your phone, building a coding portfolio on your phone is not going to be good enough. You also need Chrome installed. We're going to be using the Chrome developer tools, which are the best in the industry. So we will be using Chrome in particular, not Safari, not Firefox. Chrome in particular will be used in this course. And I'm not going through the Git installation. So I'm going to presume Git is already installed. There are plenty of great videos on how to install it if you need further help. But basically, you go to this website right here, and it'll pretty much give you the installation instructions right there. Okay, so we're not going to go through that here. If you're on Windows, by the end of it, not at the start of it, at the end of this video, you will be using VS Code, and you will want to set your VS Code terminal to use Git Bash rather than PowerShell. So we're not going to be discussing PowerShell in this video. We're going to use Bash and Bash-like syntax for our GitOps and our DevOps. And there's a how-to link in the description for that. So we're not going to do that in this video. You also need an email address and a free GitHub account. So I'm not walking through the steps to create a GitHub account. Basically, you go to github.com. And you will, here, let me sign out. Okay, so this is what you'll see when you go to github.com, and you'll be able to sign up, and you can sign up for free. You can use whatever email provider you like. I might recommend to Google, but it's whatever you like. One moment while I log back in. Okay, and so now I'm logged back in. Great, and then what if you get stuck? What if I'm zooming too fast and you're pausing and you're replaying and it's just not clicking for you in this video? And you even watched the version 1, so you've watched both of the trial by fires and some point is unclear or blurry. You should talk to humans. Interacting with humans is way better than replaying a video over and over, right? So you can join the Discord for free. There's a lot of professional programmers and fellow peer students, including myself on the Discord. I would encourage you, before you go asking questions and trying to chase people down, invest 30 minutes of your own time. I would encourage you to watch the search techniques video and then apply them for 30 minutes, searching Google, looking at Stack Overflow articles, reading documentation, and talking to ChatGPT, rubber duck debugging with ChatGPT. If you don't get to it in 30 minutes, you can check out rubber duck debugging. This is basically having a conversation with a person, and ChatGPT can also do this. Sometimes talking to another person will allow the idea to click in your own mind. So give it 30 minutes. That's going to be a professional tip anyway. Once you get on the job, you're not going to want to be bothering, seniors immediately. You're going to have a chat, try something. If it doesn't work, you're going to invest a significant portion of time. A 20, 30-minute rule is generally a good minimum. And then I would suggest up to 4 hours or the afternoon, half of a workday, so that if you get some instruction in the morning, you have a lunch, and by the end of the workday, you've made literally no progress. At that point, you should absolutely loop in your senior and ask them for help. Okay, and you can also, on YouTube, leave a comment there. Absolutely, or DM me. With that, let's get into it. So here you are. You have created your GitHub account. You've logged in, and this is sort of like the logged in home screen for GitHub. You could go here to the upper left and create a new repository right now. Another way to do this same thing is to go to the repositories tab on your account page. So here's my public facing portfolio page or account page. So this is the public one as opposed to the previous logged in home screen, which is private to me. And you'll be able to make a new repository either way. In this case, I would click on the repositories tab and I will click new in the upper right. So go ahead and do those. Either of those will work. We don't want to use a template in this case. Let's do trial by fire. I think I have one by this name. We'll call it trial by fire 2. That's great. V2. A simple HTML site deployed over GitHub pages. We'll make it public. We'll add a README. We will use the JavaScript. Let's see, is there a React? We want to use a web developer. We'll pick Node. We'll pick Node. So Node is JavaScript that's run on the server. Okay, and we'll make this open source MIT license. You are now an open source developer. You have developed a README file. From here, I would like to create an HTML page. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to press the period key. In many cases, there are multiple ways to do the things that I'll explain. For example, creating a repository, there's 2 different ways. As we continue, I'm probably just going to tell you one way to do things because I don't want to go through all the different ways. But keep in mind that there are many different ways to do these things. So I'm giving you a minimum. I'm not actually giving you the only way to do these. But in this case, I'll suggest you press the period key. And this will open up a VS Code instance in the browser. Notice the URL changed to github.dev, which is different than github.com. So github.dev is VS Code, Visual Studio Code, in the browser, so that I don't have to go through the steps of installing this on my computer. And then cloning the repository, it does that for me. And you can see here, I have these 3 files. Let me just go back to GitHub, and you'll be able to compare them. These are the 3 files that the repository was created with. They are the same 3 files. Here, if I click the README, a simple site deployed over GitHub pages. This is an awful description, isn't it? Look, the capitalization is incorrect. A simple HTML site. Let's say a simple website that is deployed over GitHub pages. And here I'm just giving you an example of how to make changes in github.dev. What is the other name of this thing? The GitHub web editor, it's sometimes called. Okay, so here I've made some changes and I will go to the left. This is called the source control tab. You see if I hover my mouse, it says source control. And if I click that, I can see the README file. Why is the README file showing up here? Because there have been changes have been made. That's why it's showing up on the source control. And there's a blue icon with a 1. It's a blue circle. And it says 1 because one file has been changed. If I go change another file, let's say I change this git ignore. And I say that I would like it to ignore my secrets.json file. Okay. I'm pushing Command S to save. On Windows, it would be Control S. And now the blue has turned into a 2. I'm going to click this backwards arrow to revert or discard my change to the git ignore file. So that effectively deletes when I said secrets.json. And then here I'm going to click the plus file because I do indeed want to save this change to the README file. And here I will give it a conventional commit. And I'll say docs better README. Okay, I'll commit and push. If that didn't work, github.dev will present me an error. So the fact that it didn't present me an error and the change has gone away, I can presume that it was properly pushed, but let's go verify that. Let's go verify that. So here, I'm refreshing the page. This is my public code portfolio. This is not deployed. This is only the code. And here I can see the README file was changed now. And if I wait 2 minutes, it will say 2 minutes ago. But notice that it's a different time from 3 minutes ago. 3 minutes ago, we had the initial commit. That's when the repository was created. Just now, we had this docs better README commit. And the docs : is derived from conventional commits. This is just a way to group the kind of change that you did. So because we changed a README file, that is a documentation file, so we will use the docs : prefix. If I'm making a code change, I might use FEAT : for feature, if I'm making a new feature. If I'm changing the way something looks, maybe the color of something, I might say style. If I'm updating a test : is another conventional commit. And you can dive in more there. This is an example of GitOps. It's a kind of GitOps. And many of your courses will not teach this skill. It's not a required skill. It's a nice to have. It is going to make you stand out compared to other junior developers and frankly, even senior developers. Let me see if there have been any questions in the YouTube chat so far. Dr. Wolf says, yo, what's up, Dr. Wolf? Thank you for being here. Clay, do we need to be going to a boot camp? You don't. You don't. It's a great option for some people. It's an awful option for other people. So I'm a big fan of personalized education, and that's a great reason to have an expert session so that you can get a plan that's tailored to your situation, your availability, your schedule, your goals, your risk tolerance, your financial situation, and more. Okay, so far we have basically done a bit of GitOps. We've set up a GitHub repository, we've pushed some changes, but we haven't written any code. A markdown file is not generally considered code. It's considered similar to like a Word document. It's sort of like documentation. It's not considered code. So now we want to make an HTML file, okay? Here, I'll go to the Explorer, the File Explorer, and that is this view, this tab here, this left tab. We were previously source control, now we're on the Explorer. And I'll right click and I'll make a new file. And I'll call this foo.html. Here's an H1 tag. H1 is for heading. There should only be one H1 on a page. I'll call this foo page. Now we'll make an H2. An H2 is the largest subheading, and you can have many of these. I'll call this the bar section. And then I'll do another H2 just to show you can, and this is the Baz section. Okay, and what do foo, bar, and Baz mean? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Here, let me create a brief article about that. What I'm doing right now is doing something called semantic HTML. These are different HTML tags. They will allow you to define the structure of your content, and I'll show you visually what that means pretty soon. A P tag is for a paragraph. An article tag is for an article, like a blog article perhaps. And a div tag is a generic element that has no semantic meaning. You can use it generically for any HTML. Use it only as a last resort. This is not to say you should never use a div. In fact, you will often use divs. Often you'll use them to show the difference between columns and rows and like a table, for example, or to move things around the page. But this is the last resort. In many cases, there is a semantic alternative that you should prefer. So here I have an article tag, which is semantically preferred. What does semantic mean? It means that it does what it says on the 10. It is what it means of the word. So semantics is the study of words. So semantic HTML is the use of HTML tags that have meaning, as opposed to div and others like it, which are generic and they don't have any particular meaning. So basically the idea here is prefer a semantic tag to a generic tag whenever one exists. Okay. And now let's explain foobar and baz. Foobar and baz are random nonsense words that developers frequently use to create code examples. Another common pattern or idiom is the concept of lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum text. Read more here. Read more. Let's see. Read more about lorem ipsum here on Wikipedia. And we will make a link. So let's get the lorem ipsum link. Lorem ipsum is taken out of Shakespeare, if I'm not mistaken. And so we'll say here on Wikipedia, I'm using a left angle, the letter A, and a right angle. Notice that it creates another set of characters, bit of text, with another left angle, a backslash, another A, and a right angle. This is called a closing tag. So here, there's no backslash. That is an opening tag. It's an opening tag for the A element, which is also called an anchor element. Here is an open tag for a P element. It is also called the paragraph element. H2 is the heading level 2, the level 2 heading. H1 is the level 1 heading. You should only have one level 1 heading. You might have many H2, 3, and it goes up to, I think, 7. Smaller and smaller headings. And you can see how I've put the heading inside of the article. So in my blog, and by the way, we're making a blog, an article has a heading and it has paragraphs. And some of those paragraphs have links. That's what we're doing here. So this anchor tag, I'm going to give it a property called href. Href means hypertext reference. Href meaning, let's check on that. Hypertext reference, that's right. So HTML is hypertext markup language. It's hypertext because it does more stuff than regular text. It's text with legs, it's text with features, it's text with cool abilities and pictures and more. So it's not just text, it's hypertext. So HTML is hypertext markup language. And hypertext reference simply means that we're going to refer to another HTML page. So we're going to refer to another website, and that is exactly what a link does. A link refers to another website so that when you click it, it takes you over there. Here I'm going to have target blank. The target is what should navigate you. I could have target self, for example, which means that my current browser tab will change when I click that link. But by changing to target blank, what I'm saying is nothing that we know of is the thing that should go to this web page. And what that generally results in is opening a new tab, because in the current page, nothing here, that's the blank. And so the browser will make a new tab. So having an href on an anchor with a blank target will open a new tab is the idea here. Read more about lorem ipsum here on Wikipedia. Here on Wikipedia then will be the bit of text that turns blue or whatever. It looks like a link because I've put that text inside of the anchor. Bearing with me? Mr. 305 Worldwide, sup, bro? Sup, thanks for being here. Quick reminder, if you're on TikTok, you can go over to YouTube or Twitch. The link is in my bio, and you'll be able to see the full screen. Okay, we've done a good amount of HTML right here. Let's see what this looks like. So how do I render this? First of all, I need to commit it so that I can save it to GitHub. Here I'm going to say feat foo page. Why foo page? Because this is an HTML page and it's named foo.html. HTML is the file type and foo is the file name. HTML, hypertext markup language, is what browsers read. When I go to google.com, all of this is a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML declares what is on the page, and CSS shows how it should look. Colors and things like that will be done with CSS. So here, notice what I've done. This is a Chrome browser. I right-click, I choose Inspect. This is opening up the dev tools. And here we can see the HTML inside of DevTools. We can see behind the scenes, as it were. And so let me click this button, which is the element selector button. And let's pick this, this Google search button right here. You can see technically, so we call this a button, but technically it is an input. It's an HTML input, and it has a role of button. Do you see that? Let's see what else we can find. Let's go inspect this thing at the bottom here. This is a span of text. What is the difference between a span and a paragraph? The difference is that a paragraph is composed of multiple spans, so that you can put any number of letters in a span. And a paragraph will typically have multiple sentences. And then there's also a rendering difference, which is that a paragraph will render in block mode, where a span does not change the rendering. A simple way to think about this is that you can have spans inside of paragraphs, but you cannot have paragraphs inside of other paragraphs. That's a simple way to think about it. And here we see an anchor. You see how that says A with an href? Let's see if we can see the target on this one. I don't see it. I don't see a target on this one. So what I should expect is that it will change the current page. It's implicitly a self-target. It will not open a new tab. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And we see it changes the current page. It doesn't open a new tab. What else can we find? So we have these inputs. Here's a div, okay? We talked about a div. We said it's generic. You use the div when you want to deal with shapes and sections of the page, but it doesn't have any particular kind of content. It's not a blog article. It's not a paragraph. It's just like a section of the page. And you can see that's exactly what's done here. There's this gray pill shape, sort of oval. And the way that they achieve that oval shape is that they put a div there, and then they give it some CSS. The CSS will do things like say, this is the color of the text, and the background is gray. So this is actually gray right here. This strange string of letters is called a hex code, and it is a way to define color. So here I could get rid of the hex code and do something more intuitive like the word red. And you can see that I've changed this pill to be red. Border radius means it's going to be rounded. I could say border radius 0, and it will be pointy again because there's no radius. A circle has to have a radius, right? So you can see how this is CSS. We'll get to that by the end of the stream. And this is allowing us to change the way certain shapes look on the page, certain parts of the page. And that is different from the text itself, which is also in a div, but that is actually not good quality. So Google wrote this inefficiently, basically. They should have made this a paragraph or a span. So semantic HTML is a good practice, but even the most advanced developers frequently miss on some of the basics you'll quickly find. And by sticking to these fundamentals, you're going to quickly put yourself ahead of many other juniors, and sometimes you'll be ahead of seniors at the time that you start. Is this an HTML class? No, we're going to do a whole website. We're going to do a whole website, but that starts with HTML. Okay, and then input, here's another input. Inputs are anything that a user will interact with. So as a user, I'm not clicking the letter G. Here's another poor practice. I shouldn't be able to click this thing, actually. That should be some sort of input if it's clickable, or a button. Okay, let's stop ripping on Google. Sorry about that, Google. They do a lot of good stuff. Okay, back to our own site. So we have a foo page. because it is a HTML page. And we went through HTML is what browsers read. It tells browsers how to show stuff. It's not doing the colors. It's not doing the interactivity. Let's do Google one more time. You saw that thing expand, right? So this section right here, when I click it, it expands, and then I click it again and it shrinks. This is called a user interaction or a dynamic rendering change. This is done with JavaScript, okay? So up here, this picture that says Google would be a good example of what HTML does. It simply puts stuff there. It simply puts stuff there. It doesn't give it any ability to move or change. JavaScript is going to give it the ability to move and change. And notice how it changes from gray to sort of light blue. That will be CSS. CSS is going to control color and shapes and hover effects sometimes too. So here on the bottom, when I hover, let's see. I think that's not able to be viewed on the screen because of the, yeah, here on the bottom when I hover, now you can see it, right? That is also controlled with CSS. Are you going to record this and upload it? Yeah, this will all be recorded. You'll be able to view it multiple times. Okay, so we have this HTML. Let's commit it and push. I didn't see an error. I'm going to go to my public portfolio and confirm that it showed up. We see feet foo page. Okay, great. There's an HTML file. So how do I view it as a website? Right now I'm viewing it as code in my portfolio. But if I have like a restaurant website, I would never send a restaurant consumer, someone who wants to place an order. I would never send them here. This is the code repository. This is the code form of the website. I would send them to the deployed or rendered form of the website. And this is what's missed in a whole bunch of other programming classes, is how to deploy it. Deploying it is called DevOps. So here's the software development lifecycle. Let's get an image of this. We're going to analyze. That means we're going to basically come up with the idea for what we want to build. In this case, a restaurant website. Very straightforward. UX, UI design. What is it going to look like, right? So I might draw some pictures in Photoshop, show them to people, and have some feedback and see like, what does the right website look like before I've written any code? 3 is implementation. This means writing the code. 4 is testing. We're not going to be covering testing today. 5 is deployment. And then 6 is maintenance. Basically, whenever the menu changes, I go and change the website too. That whole process is called maintenance. After it goes live, making sure it's continuously updated. So that is how you develop software. Deployment is frequently missed in many intro classes, but it's not that hard if you do it right. And that's what I want to show you. And this is also called DevOps. And you know, some people, look at this graph. Some people make DevOps look like this really complicated concept. It's not that complicated depending on how you do it. So I'm going to use a technology called GitHub Pages, which is built into GitHub and allows you to publish your website for free, to deploy it for free. And so that's what we'll be doing. And it's connected to GitHub. So we have pushed this page. We've made the code public, and now I want to use GitHub Pages to get a rendered form. So the way you do that is you go to your repository settings. Here's the repository page. Settings is on the far right. Here we are. I'm going to press Control F or Command F and look for the word pages. You can see it's been highlighted here. Now I want to say that I will deploy from a branch. I'm going to choose the main branch. Notice going back to the code in the upper left, it says main. We haven't talked about what branches are, and we don't need to at this point. Just know that your code will start with a main branch. Every time you create a GitHub repository, you start with a main branch. So we are going to deploy that main branch. So I picked it here, and then I'll click Save. Okay. GitHub Pages have been saved. This is where the GitHub Pages experience does a very poor job of telling you like, okay, what now? Like, where do I go now? And that's where me as the educator, I'm going to help you out real quick. You go to oh shoot, what is it called? It's IO, I think, GitHub.io. Yeah. So you see here, it's vanderveer.github.io. GitHub.io is the GitHub Pages domain. A domain is like google.com, the website name, that's the domain. So there's github.com, where your code is saved. We saw github.dev, which has the built-in VS Code instance that allows you to edit code. And here's github.io, yet another GitHub domain. And github.io is the GitHub Pages deployment URL. So there's many like websites on github.io. It's not one site. It's like there might be a billion websites on there. I don't know how many it is. It's many. So how do we get to your specific website for this repository? The answer is we go to your username.github.io/the repository name. So here is trial by fire v2. A simple website that is deployed over GitHub Pages. Well, this is not my foo page. That's what I want you to notice. This is not my foo page. That's because I need to go to foo.html. And now I can see my foo page, okay? Arif says, hey dude, what's up? What's up, Arif? Thanks for being here. Notice that it's all black and white, and that is because we have no CSS. There is no color here. The one exception would be the link, and when I click it, it opens a new tab, as we discussed. The target is blank. That is, the target is nowhere on this page. So then your browser, Chrome itself knows, oh, if it's not on that page, I better make a new page. I better make a new tab. So this is using what's called default style. Notice that the font style has what's called serifs. What is a serif? It's sort of like the edge of letters. You see here? So on the right, there is a serif font, and on the left, there is a sans serif, or without serif font. Well, how does your browser decide like which one to use? Like, I didn't tell it to have serifs on my letters. It's just the default style built into Chrome. That's what's being used right now. So everything will not necessarily be black and white. We can see that with the anchor. The more correct way to describe this is that everything is minimally styled or basically styled or styled using default built-in styles. When we talk about styles, styles will refer to font size, boldness, color. So notice that my heading is a little bit larger than my paragraph, right? The font is a little bit larger, it's bolder. I didn't tell it the amount or the size or the boldness. How did it decide that? Well, there's built-in style. Let's go inspect it. There's built-in style on that heading 1 tag, and it's different than the built-in style on that heading 2 tag, the subheading. So your browser has these built-in styles. Now let's say that I don't want to do that. I don't want it to be black and white. I want to add some color in my life. Okay, here we are. Now we're on GitHub Dev, back in the code. And there's a few ways to do this. The first thing I can do is I can say style equals color red. I'll save that. This will be style commit red heading. Okay. Stage, commit, and push. Refresh the page. It might take a moment for the deployment to work. You can see my browser tab is spinning here. Is that still not working? Let me look on the portfolio page. We're confirming. We do have the red heading. It takes a little bit of time. It might take a minute or two. Let me double check my code while I wait. H2 style, so I'm expecting this to show up on the bar section. Here's the bar section. The H2 there has no style. There it is. Finally, it happened. So sometimes as a developer, this happens, and you have to wait for certain programs because they take time. That's okay. A little bit of patience. Don't freak out. So now the red color is there. And this is what's called inline style, because I've put the style there in my HTML. This is generally not a good idea. And I'll let you go do some research about why. Well, let me give an example why. Let's say that I would like all of my headings to be red. I don't want to repeat yourself. That's not efficient. Don't repeat yourself. So dry code, So rather than saying the same thing many times, which is not technically efficient, it's slow for me as a developer to write the same thing many times. And it also creates a maintenance problem. Remember the SDLC? Part of the SDLC was maintenance. So let's say I want to do a change on my website where I change all of the heading colors. That will be a bunch of work if I'm repeating myself. It will not be a bunch of work if I do something different, which is I create a CSS class. So here I will create a CSS class. So what I've written right here inside of the style tags, the style tag means I'm going to write CSS. So here I've created a class. CSS classes start with the period, and then I call it I've called it red-heading. Now I will change this to be called class. So that will do the same thing, but the advantage is now I can use this class. And you might say, John, that really hasn't saved you any time. You still have to use this class all over the place. That's true, but if I change let's call it main theme. No, let's leave it as red heading. Maybe I want to change the shade of red. By the way, you can see I can hover on this thing and click it, and I have access to a color palette of various shades of red. Now I want to change the shade of red. I only have to change one place instead of many places. Here we only have 3 places that are being updated, but imagine a website that has 1,000 different places to go change. It's much simpler to use CSS classes. It's considered a better approach for maintenance reasons. So here I'll say style red heading class. We'll stage, commit, and push. That'll take a few minutes to propagate and deploy, as we covered earlier. So in the meantime, we've talked a bit about CSS. Let's get into JavaScript. So here, let's say that this is my blog. And in my first article, I'll call my first article, here's the title, Explaining Foo Bar Baz and Lorem Ipsum. Okay. We'll take this paragraph, Command X, click the end of the paragraph, enter twice, Command V, Command S, and we've put those 2 paragraphs in the first article. This second article is blank. I'm going to actually delete it, and we'll make a new section. This is a semantic tag showing that you have different sections of your website. So now my website has 2 sections. Indeed, my web page. So a website might have multiple pages. In our case, it happens that our website is only 1 page. Parmal, thanks for being here. So we have a section that shows our blog articles, and I'll give this an ID. Show, or like blog articles. There's my blog articles section. And this new section, I'll give it an ID, and it will be create new blog article. So in this section, we'll create a new blog article, and we're going to use a very special HTML tag called a form. A form, you might know from logging into Facebook or something like that, or here on Google again. My search. I'm typing in, and I'm going to hit enter. That is a form. It's a very special thing where the user is going to submit some information. So here, our form will be the new article form. Okay, I'm using these double quotes to say that that is the ID of this form, and we'll use that in our JavaScript to pick it out of the HTML. We'll see what that means when I get there. Thought on Nuxt. It's pretty cool. Nuxt is pretty cool. What do we want our article to have? Just 2 things, really. A title and then body content. Okay, so we need 3 things in our form. We need a title, body content, and a submit button. so that we need to put the title there, put the text there, and add a submit button. You might also think that maybe I would want an author name section or a date section on my blog article. We're going to ignore those, but feel free to add them to your own version of this. Okay, so here's the text area. I need to give it a name. The name here will be article content. And the name here will be article title. Okay. Notice in this case, I don't have the left angle, right angle open like I do with the P here. So I don't open and close. It's self-closing. This is a case where you can use ChatGPT. Many of these facts are brute facts. They're things that you would theoretically just need to memorize, but you don't need to because you can research them. You can Google them. You can go to Stack Overflow. You can read documentation. And you can also ask ChatGPT. Notice here I'm using GPT-4, which is substantially better than GPT-3. By the way, before we ask GPT-4, I'll mention that there is an official specification. And here you can see the HTML living standard. So you go to these various places like maybe csstricks.com. So this is the organization that defines the official specification. So csstricks.com is a great website that tells you about how to do things in CSS, but they are not the official definers or creators of the definition of CSS. These are just like super users and smart people and programmers telling you how to do things in CSS. There is an official set of CSS rules, and that's called the specification. You can say the CSS specification. w3c.org, okay? So this is like the official documentation of CSS. There's one of these for HTML. It's called a specification, also for CSS and JavaScript. So you can look for the JavaScript specification. Lots of people want to tell you how to do JavaScript, but there is an official specification. And to make things more confusing, JavaScript is like a nickname. Technically, it is the ECMAScript language specification. Basically, JavaScript is like napkin. You know how we call, or like a napkin. Napkin is actually an old brand name. What else is this true for? Tupperware. Plastic boxes are the generic, but we often use the slang Tupperware. Tupperware is actually a brand name. It's just very popular, so we refer to it as that. And that's the truth for JavaScript as well. So there's a company called Oracle, and you can read all about the history of JavaScript. Hopefully there's a Fireship video for this. Yeah, so this W3 Schools article is great. The Wikipedia, History of JavaScript, Fireship. How about Honeypot, History of JavaScript? Yeah, React.js, the documentary. Maybe they don't have one for JavaScript. Maybe it's just Honeypot. So you can check out that as well. Basically, there's some historically interesting reasons we call it JavaScript, but technically the specification is an ECMAScript. ECMAScript is the open source one, rather than the one based on Java. Java is licensed by Oracle. Okay, so there are all these official sources you can go explore, and again, check out the search video here. That's super slow. What's going on there? That was so slow. Check out this search techniques for coding in the Laterally checklist. And it'll give you some tips, but basically looking for valued trusted sources like Stack Overflow, official documentation, and these days using ChatGPT as well. So here, I need to put into plain English words what I would like to do here. And so what I would like to do is create a form where I can add a new blog article to my website. how can I create here I'm even assuming that I know what a form is. Let's say I don't know what a form is. I have a web page. I would like a user to be able to add a new blog article on my web page. How do I do this? And it should tell me about a form. Yep, it's very, very front, create a form. Now they're going to say that you need to do front end and back end work. That's true. That's only true if you want the user to be able to save it to a database. And that's a different topic, and we will not be doing that here. So we will just be doing a front end only approach. And you can see it really tells you a lot of stuff to do here. I'll say, give me an example HTML form. So you can have it dive in step by step. And here you can see it's giving you doc type HTML. So that's HTML. We have the style tag. So the CSS is going inside there. And it's styling this thing pretty intensely. A lot of this is not necessary, right? So you might be tempted to copy all of this. Make sure that you are only taking what is either needed or wanted. So maybe at the end of the day, you will want all of that, but test them one by one, or at least be able to read it and understand what it's doing. So here it's making the text area have 150 pixel height. Like, is there anything magic about a particular size of height? No. But I still might like it, but I can try it out and tinker with the number. The form is the piece that I really want, and here it is. So I'm going to copy that piece, and I'm going to put it into my HTML page. And I'm going to compare them. So I don't want to overwrite. I want to put it down below, enter twice, paste. And I want to compare what I did and what GPT did. So I'm noticing that GPT put an action here, but I didn't. It's using a method post. Like, what is that? What's going on? This is using the backend, and we don't need to do that. So we'll delete that. Here's a form group. Okay, what is this form group doing? Well, I can see it's simply grouping an input to its label. That seems like a good idea. Let me keep that. So because the input is self-closing, it doesn't have any text to identify. Like here, if I go to Google again, you see this place where I'm searching, it doesn't actually have any text in it. Like, how do I know that it's for searching? In Google's case, I don't know. I think a lot of people just know, maybe because the icon, or because when they hover, it says search, or because they type before they even think about it. But for many other websites, you're going to want to give a piece of text that says what that field is for. And so here I might add, I'll edit this HTML and I'll add a label that says search. Okay, so now you see that it says search there. And now it's very clear to the user, like, oh, if I was confused before, oh, this thing is for searching. In the case of my website, I do want a label. I want to put the first is for the article title. The second is for the content. And then the third will be this submit button. So that looks really good, actually. And I think the only part that I think is missing is I want an ID on my form. So let me update that form to use the ID. Otherwise, I'll delete what I put and keep what GPT put. So now I'm going to commit this. Committing is like saving your video game backup, right? So we want to do a lot of them, because if you fight the boss and you die, you want to go back to a recent point in time. You don't want to have to do a whole lot of stuff over again. So here, this will be create blog form. Commit and push that. All right. And now it's time for JavaScript. We want our JavaScript at the very bottom. We can use a script tag. The reason we want it at the bottom is because JavaScript can be slow. And if your JavaScript is taking time for the browser to load, you will have a blank page. Your page will be blank until the browser has read all the way through all of that text and processed it. So if we put the JavaScript at the very bottom instead of the top, it will read the HTML and put it on the screen. It'll read the CSS and put it on the screen. So your screen will look good. And then it will start processing the JavaScript and the screen already looks good. So the screen looks better to the end user if we put the JavaScript at the bottom instead of the top. If I put the JavaScript above the HTML and CSS, the screen would be entirely blank until it's done loading, and it would just look really slow. You see what I mean? So that's the reason we like to put the JavaScript at the bottom. And now I want to do something called binding. Here, and let's see if I can get GPT-4 to help me out here. I'm going to say, I don't want a backend or a database. I just want the blog article to show up on the website when a user submits a form. How do I do this with front-end code only? So the back-end code is going to be a database. Databases are on the back end and browsers are on the front end. So we want to simplify this problem of the blog article for the purpose of the trial by fire by only dealing with the front end. Later in the Latterly curriculum, we do full stack development, including database work. But for this trial by fire, we're skipping the database stuff, basically. And what I'm hoping it does is it tells us how to bind JavaScript. It says JavaScript code goes here. Okay, this is one way to do it. This is one way to do it. And again, there are many ways of doing most things in programming. So here, it's using JavaScript to find the form and add an event listener. You can follow GPT and this will work, actually. And so let's go ahead and do it that way. But what I would have done is I would have used the HTML handler. So here, there's something called onSubmit, which is an HTML handler. And there I can say create article. Here I will define a function, create article. And I will select data inputs, create article, write article to the HTML. Those are basically the steps. This is called early binding. Early binding means as soon as it reads the HTML, it already knows that there's going to be create article coming up soon. What ChatGPT has told us to do is called late binding, where it doesn't use the HTML handler. It binds in the JavaScript. This is late binding because as the web page reads it, it's not going to know about create article until later. And so here, ChatGPT is saying document.getElementById. And we're going to use that article form. And then it's saying add event handler or add event listener for the submit event. Okay, so these are equivalent. This line 43 here, notice that every line has a number on it. So this line 43 is a late binding approach to doing the same thing as here, create article. Okay, so they're doing equivalent things. They're attaching a JavaScript function to this form so that when a user clicks, when they click it, that's called submitting. When a user clicks that submit button, that's when it's going to snap an article into this blog articles section. And so let's say I'm a bit overwhelmed and it's like, wow, GPT, you really helped me out here. That seems correct, but my HTML is very different from yours. Can you update my code to do essentially the same thing? No, that's not a good way to phrase it. That will work, but I think if we can phrase it more clearly, it'll be better. Can you update my code to add a new blog article into the HTML when a user clicks the submit button on my form? And here I'm going to hold the shift key and press enter twice. I'm going to type 3 backticks. Shift enter, 3 backticks, and I'm going to paste my code here. So this is an example of how to prompt GPT and to show it my code. The 3 backticks, this is called a backtick or a grave tick. This is the character that I've typed. You can find it on your keyboard. And 3 backticks is indicative of a block of code or a section of code. So this will be familiar to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is familiar with writing on the internet. And if you just look at a bunch of writing on the internet, you'll see that the 3 backticks is often associated with a block of code. So let's look for block of code markdown syntax. The way that you write things is called syntax. The letters that you use and the characters that you use, whether they're letters, numbers, or symbols like commas and periods, these are all called syntax. Okay, so let's see if we can get someone to tell us the creating and highlighting code blocks. So here you see, this is an example on GitHub again of writing a code block in Markdown. You use the 3 backticks. And so that's what GPT is familiar with, and we're taking advantage of that to tell it that this is actual code as opposed to ordinary writing. So let's go I'll just copy this entire thing to my clipboard. I'm going to copy the entire thing as it is right now. And I'm going to click in the middle of those and paste it and send it. Let's see what GPT does with that. GPT says, look, it's going fast. It says, I'll modify your existing JavaScript function to handle the form submission. And you can see what we're doing here. So GPT has done this binding to a function, and this is called an anonymous function because it doesn't have its own name. I think it would be better to give it a name, but this will still work anyway. It does something called event.prevent default. You're like, what does that do? GPT left a code comment to tell you. It prevents the default form submission action. Basically, this is going to make it so your page doesn't refresh, is what it'll do. And now we are going to select the data inputs. Get element by ID title. Now, I don't have anything with an ID title, or do I? Let me see. Maybe I forgot. I do. There it is, for ID title. Okay. That was something GPT wrote. So it's getting this element. The HTML tag is also called an HTML element. So GPT is getting a reference to this using the ID, and then whatever the user has put in there, GPT or your browser will be able to read it. When they click the button, at the time that they click, your browser will look at the text they've written here. And that's what we are getting when we say dot value. So it looks at this element and then it gets the value out of it using this period syntax. So that's getting the title, so this is a variable name, the JavaScript variable that is holding the data of whatever they wrote. So they might have written, my dear Sally. Maybe they typed that in the HTML form. So when they click it, JavaScript will put the letters, my dear Sally, in memory, and it will give it that block of memory, those letters, it's giving it the name title. So that's what we're doing. We're labeling that data with a variable name. That's all that variables are, is they are names of blocks of data. Great. So it gets the title, it gets the content, and then it appends it to the blog articles section. It gets this blog article section by ID and appends the child. Let's copy this. And we're going to basically just copy that and paste over our script. So our script was like poorly done, and GPT filled in the gaps for us. I'm saving this. I'm creating a feature here. So this is a JavaScript feature. And this will be append blog article. And now we've done 3 different commits, and we haven't actually looked at the site updated yet. So let's go take a look at that. It's probably going to take a minute. Here, I'll empty cache and hard reload. It's probably going to take a minute for those changes to go through. Here you can see the red color, my blog explaining foobar, buzz, and lorem ipsum. And you can see this isn't very shiny or well done, right? This is pretty basic. I expect this not to work right now. Test, my dear Sally, submit. And it doesn't work right now because the JavaScript isn't there yet, because we just submitted it a second ago. And you can look here in the HTML and there's no script tag. So we should not expect it to work until that script tag shows up, basically. So while that is deploying, let me give you a quick thought on your first and worst HTML website. So this trial by fire, it will produce a deployed website. Everyone will be able to see it. You should be able to go look at this URL right now if you want to. If you want to leave the video and go to that website, you'll be able to see it right now. You'll have to go to /foo.html, and that will be the last thing we do, is we're going to remove that piece. So this will be your first and worst website, but it is a website. What's the you're the worst pirate I've ever seen meme? Pirates of the Caribbean, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of. Great. You're the worst website I've ever seen, but it is a website. And I think it's really important to include your first and worst website on your portfolio and talk about it. Juniors often have this misconception. They want to present themselves as polished, professional, expert. So they will only show their most elegant portfolio pieces. And in the worst case, they will only show one. And it might be like a Netflix clone. And they think it looks really good. This is like, it looks just like Netflix. I've made it, haven't I? The answer is no. Employers want to know that you can do more than copy a existing website. They want to see that you can do original work, and they want to see growth. And because they want to see growth, that's why it's incredibly important to say, here's my first and worst website. Here's my new cool best one. Look how far I've come in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Do not feel ashamed of this basic website. Believe it or not, and programmers will appreciate this. Senior programmers and intelligent managers who have been programmers will all appreciate this. While unfortunately, a lot of juniors don't appreciate this. That this relatively ugly website is still a huge technical achievement. The fact that you have, I don't know, however long it took you, whether it's a few hours or a few days, you've been able to ship and deploy a working HTML website is pretty impressive. Yep, this is a blog. Hey, how's it going? Okay, and let's see if it's deployed since that spiel is done. Now I see the script tag and my dev tools on the elements pane. Okay, so now I expect it to work. I'll say how to make the web. Do it just like this. Boop. And you see, that has shown up on the page itself. I can inspect, and here a new article tag has been created inside of the blog articles section. I'll call this a third article. Isn't it great? And there you go. So this is what we're calling the trial by fire. This is a front-end only vanilla JavaScript blog. Some bits of homework that you might derive from this. One is use local storage. So if I refresh the page, those will be gone. They're not saved. I just refreshed my page and they're not saved. You can cause it to be saved by using a database and a full stack application and a backend, or I can cause it to be saved on your computer. It won't be saved for everyone, but it will be saved locally on your computer so that even if you close the tab and come back, you'll see those blog articles. I can do that using a tool called local storage. In fact, let's just go ahead and ask it here. Update this web page so that the current articles are saved to local storage. So it's going to explain the answer there. Another thing you can do is change the style. You can change the background color. Okay. Make the headings look better, change the font. And one other thing which we can do and we will do now is to change from foo.html to index.html. And here we'll touch on the fact that index is a special name. So we called it foo, and how did we get there? We went into my folder /foo.html. So we looked at the specific HTML file that we wanted to render. But if you go to google.com, I don't have to go to google.com.html. How is it showing an HTML file here? It is actually showing an HTML file. It's just called google.com/index.html. So index.html is a special file that you do not have to use it. You do not have to use its name. So technically google.com is a folder. Here on my computer, I'm using Apple, right? And this is my documents folder. On Windows, you might also have a documents folder. And here, imagine that I have an HTML file. So here I have something called laterallylogo.png. What if it was laterallylogo.html? Okay, that would be an HTML file in a folder. All a website is a folder on another computer. That's called a server. It's literally a folder of files on someone else's computer. And we call that the cloud, and we call that the internet. But there's a computer out there somewhere that has google.com/index.html. And that's all you're doing is it's sending you a copy, and then your browser is reading it. And your browser has the ability to read that HTML and that CSS and JavaScript. And with those data, it's making the thing in front of us, which is this interactive picture. That's all the website is. It's an interactive picture. Okay, here, now, I don't know if I saved it actually. So here I've changed file name foo to HTML, which means I'm deleting foo and creating HTML. And this will be called a chore. And this will be called change, or like use index file name. So when you do a chore, what it means is you are changing the way something is built or deployed, but you are not changing any of the actual features for the user. You could argue that what I've done is a feature change. Anyway, that's not a big deal. You could use either one, feature or chore. And so pretty soon this page will be gone. And when this page is gone, you'll be able to see my website anyway, using the folder name instead of the .html literal. So here, ChatGPT has updated the JavaScript code. This is awesome. Blindly trusting GPT is not a good idea. What you should do is you should look line by line at every code and ideally say out loud what it does in your native tongue. So I should be able to read this and say, I'll just go ahead and do it because I know what this is doing. This is adding an event listener to the document so that whenever the page is loaded, it will execute the load articles function. We see later the load articles function is parsing my local storage, getting the articles, and then writing them on the page. We can also see that my late bound function, it's an anonymous function on the new article form, will write the articles to the document, but now it's doing something additional, which is called add article, and then add article after add article, it is saving the article to my local storage. So the addition of save article to local storage and load articles means that my articles will appear persistent. I'll be able to refresh my page, close the tab, open it again, and I'll see those same articles. Let's go ahead and do this. So I'm copying this, pasting this, saving it. And again, and this will be feature use local storage. So I did literally copy what GPT-4 did, and I'm only comfortable doing that because I understand what it did. If you did not understand what it did, you would want to go line by line and read it and research those and maybe Google search or ask ChatGPT. Like ask ChatGPT, what does this line do? Please explain what this code does. I'm going to do a colon, shift enter, 1, 2, 3, shift enter, paste, shift enter, 1, 2, 3, enter. Please explain what this code does. It's a JavaScript command that adds an event listener to the document object for DOM content loaded event. And so it gives you a real detailed technical breakdown, but basically this first sentence here is basically the bit. When you open a web page, the browser starts by loading the HTML document. So this event is the event that happens whenever the page loads. It's just a page load, okay? Here I'm going to empty cache and hard reload, and it's gone. It's gone. By the way, if you ever refresh your page, maybe you waited 5 minutes, and you're like, man, the changes still haven't propagated. The deployment still doesn't seem to be done. You could be having a caching problem. So instead of left-clicking the refresh button, try right-clicking, empty cache, and hard reload. And now we can see foo is gone, which is good because I just want to use my index page. Remember, I don't type index.html. By the way, this will work. Let me just go ahead and do it. This will work. But the whole benefit of the index is that I don't have to. I don't have to specify an HTML file, and it creates what we call a pretty URL. That's basically the idea, is that this is prettier, it's easier to type and read. I'm going to right-click, empty cache, and hard reload, and it's still here. It's still here even though I cleared my cache because I don't have to call the HTML file. At this point, I'm going to take this URL, go to my public GitHub. I'm going to change my about description here by clicking the gear icon, and I'm going to paste that link on the website. Ladies and gentlemen, you now have your first publicly deployed website in your portfolio. People can go check it out and use it. Here, let's say I've made a thing right now. Yeehaw. Submit. Okay, so it's submitting, but if I refresh, here's an important note. If you want to do the hard refresh, you need to open DevTools. So go to inspect, and now it will show up. It wasn't showing up a moment ago because DevTools was not open. So now if I empty cache and hard reload, well, look, I've made a thing shows up. Crazy. Let me close this. Let me go over here. Empty cache and hard reload. I've made a thing shows up. You see how it's persistent now? I'll close all of the tabs. Refresh this portfolio page. I'll open it again. I've made a thing shows up. That is because the JavaScript is reading it out of my local storage. Local storage is some data that's saved in Chrome itself. Here's local storage. I can literally type local storage in my console. This is called a console. And I can see the data. So there's one article in there. Articles has length 1. I'll leave you with one last thing about the console and debugging. So let's say that something goes wrong. How do you troubleshoot it? There's a bunch of ways, but one way is to use the console. Let me open this code back up. I'm going to have 2 tabs of code. Now I'll press the period key so that one of the tabs changes to the developer mode, VS Code in the browser. And then this is still the portfolio. And I will simply console.log hello. We'll commit and push that. We'll say feat log hello. The benefit of the console is for developers. The console is intended for developers. Changing the console will never change what's shown on the public website. It will only provide information within the DevTools. So that's why it's great for developers for troubleshooting. I can investigate issues without changing the website look, because changing the website look might bother my end users. And I want to investigate my issue without bothering my end users. That's why the console is so useful. Let's give this a moment and see if it says hello. Here it's telling me that there's an error finding the favicon. That's because our website doesn't have a favicon. A favicon, you can see these icons. There's the GitHub logo, the Latterly logo, ChatGPT logo. Those are called favicons, and ours is using this strange globe. That's just a default that shows when you don't have a favicon. And so notice when I load the page is automatically looking for the favicon. That's something built into the browser, and it doesn't find it, so it has an error. It shows this error on the console. It doesn't show it to the users, and we like the console for that. And now the console is saying hello, and I can even see where it set it from. It set it right here. You see that trial by fire v2:42. 42 is the line number. So it's telling me exactly where this happened. Here I can do some other fun things. I can check out local storage, and I can mess around on the console. I can even execute JavaScript right now. There's something called an alert, which will make a pop-up happen on the browser. How are you? You can see I made the pop-up show because I did this JavaScript here in my DevTools. DevTools, I can go over to, let's see if I have a style tab. I can go over to the elements. And just like I can manipulate my JavaScript right now in real time, I can also manipulate my CSS right now in real time. Let's say that I want to change the style. I don't see where the style, oh, the style is going to be in the head tag, isn't it? But let's say I can't find style. I can actually do Command or Control F and look for style. And there's a search function built into DevTools. And here I can double click. And even though it's called red heading, let's say, because I'm mad, I'd like to change it to say blue. Okay. And so I've changed that right now in DevTools only. It's only affecting me. It hasn't changed other people who are using the website. It's not bothering them. This is only on my own browser instance. It's changed red to become blue. And you can do this to prototype or try out changes in content, changes in the way things look. And you can also use this for debugging. Maybe there is an HTML element that you can't see. It seems to have vanished. You could have it change its background to be bright red. And then maybe you don't see the text anymore, but you see, oh, there's a bright red square. Somehow it's gone over there and the text has dropped out of it. And you can look into reasons why that might be occurring. Maybe your JavaScript is writing to the wrong location, for example. Okay, I think that is going to cover the trial by fire for today. Let's briefly review what we did. We went over HTML. HTML defines the content of your website, the stuff that's in it, including headings, paragraphs, and even sections of the website. And a section might be the difference between the blog articles section and the form to create a new blog article. Those might be considered two different sections. And by the way, right now the sections are naturally stacked above each other, but I could easily change that to be 2 columns if I wanted to. We went through CSS, which is going to change the color and the font size, the shape of things. Maybe it'll give rounded edges. We talked about there are some built-in style rules. There's built-in CSS. If you don't write red heading, then the browser will make it black and white by default. We talked about semantic HTML, that we should prefer semantic tags like section or article to something generic like a div as often as we can. But in some cases, we do genuinely have a generic shape rather than any meaningful content. An example might be some circles along the side of the page, just for design aesthetic only. Those could be called divs. And div is a division or just a piece of the web page. And then we went over to JavaScript, where we saw that JavaScript allows the user to do things and interact with the page. HTML and CSS might provide something that I can read, but it's not going to be something that I can interact with until I add JavaScript. And so we used a form, and then we connected that form to JavaScript, and we allowed the user to pass data, specifically the title of an article and the content of that article. We saw the difference between early and late binding of the form, early and late binding to JavaScript, and then we used the document API. So every time that we said document period, this is the document API. An API is an application programming interface. It's just a collection of functions, a collection of things that you can use. The document API is built into Chrome itself. And we use the document API to extract data out of the form and then add a new blog article to the blog articles section. Finally, we saw local storage will allow me to save and load data on my own computer, but it doesn't work for other people's computers. If we want to have shared data store, that's when a database would come in. So things that you would do in the future: explore full stack development with a database, explore easier to use tools. Instead of using the document API itself, you could do this in a simpler way with something like React, basically. Basically, React allows you to avoid using the document API. And so now that I have a reason to pick up a new tool, I should do so. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to use React because it's really popular, I don't really know what it does. If you go try out React, and that would be a separate video, you would be able to see it makes it easier to change the page instead of manually using the document API. And then the last thing we did is we saw some Git ops, commits, conventional commit, pushing, deploying, using GitHub to verify when changes occurred, and using GitHub pages to deploy a publicly accessible version of the website. And that's how we created our very first project. Great. So if you look at the checklist, that will have been this step. The next thing to do would be go back and reinforce until you're comfortable. So continue tinkering with HTML. Maybe you work on this same project. Maybe you make new elements. Maybe you change existing elements until you feel confident with basic HTML, including forms and semantic HTML. Then you would go on to explore more CSS rules. We've only scratched the surface. There's a lot you can do. Just Google cool stuff I can do with CSS. Animations you can do in CSS. That's something cool to check out. A gradient or a gradient background. So let's look for an example of a gradient background. Here is a blue that it changes from a darker blue on the left to a lighter blue on the right. That change over time or over space is called a gradient. So I encourage you to try changing the CSS rules and making yours look unique to you. Don't just go copy somebody. Do something that looks cool to you. Like, what colors do you like? What fonts do you like? Play with CSS. Maybe you add an animation if you want. That's optional. And when you get comfortable with that, that's when it's time to step into React, And if you're bold, you can try and do that yourself. But for many people, that will be the right time to get into a boot camp, take an online course, watch a different YouTube video, or consider mentorship at that point. Once you understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React, you just basically want to do that over again a few times to have a portfolio. So you'll have your first project. You're going to want to make a portfolio project that shows your other portfolios. Here's an example of that. Not John's link tree. So here's a portfolio site. It literally just talks about my other sites, right? Portfolio highlights. So this would be a portfolio site. So you have your trial by fire front-end only blog, hopefully you go for, it's not hopefully, you're going to need to go for a full stack React TypeScript blog. You'll have a portfolio site. Those will be 3. And then you'll want to do a capstone that's unique to you and your interests. Rather than just doing blogs, do something that's unique to you and your interests. That's going to give you a powerful story to tell at your interview. And that's good enough. You can have a portfolio of 4 projects. That's actually quite good. From there, you'll be ready to do job search prep. And come on down to Laterally, and we'll walk you through the job search prep too. So there's basically, it's optimize your resume, social network, optimize your LinkedIn. There's something called the 5 to 23 patterns article that will help you with technical interview preparation and leak code. And anyway, this is just step by step along the checklist. The checklist is currently a length of 19. And by the time you're done with the trial by fire, that will have been the 3rd step. And you should be able to take these next couple steps within a week or 2. And then you'll be more than a quarter of the way there. I hope that doesn't sound like you haven't done much, because getting a quarter of the way to a programmer is like a major accomplishment, and you should celebrate. And one of the ways you can celebrate is tapping the like button and following the page and attending one of the live streams. So I live stream weekly, and you can always drop by and ask a question. We'll go to my channel. Here I am on YouTube. That was an accident. I meant to go to the live tab here. And yeah, you can view some of the previous live streams, or you'll be able to join a live video. Like I just accidentally joined my own live video. You can see the red live icon in the lower right of the thumbnail of the video. And drop on by and ask a question, or you can ask a question at any time on the Discord. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.